I am here with Alex, who has an incredible story of strength and bravery. And I'm so touched and happy that you were willing to come on and tell the world, hopefully, the world your story, because I think there's a huge message in it. And I think there's this beacon of hope that even in disaster and trauma, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And you certainly have had quite the tunnel to get through. And I know because I've been friends with your family for a while now. And, your story is one that, especially as Canadians, we never imagine it happening to anybody we know. And so I'm going to leave it to you to explain sort of, what happened and the path that you ended up on, and, to see where you are at this point in your life. And you're what, 16 now?
Yeah.
16. Oh my gosh. I remember when you were young. So, tell us a little bit about you guys lived in Canada and then you moved down to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a huge transition right there, because I believe it was for your dad's job.
Yeah, we also moved to Dubai when we were really little.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was our first move, and then we moved back to Canada. This was all because of my dad's job.
Yeah.
And then I think when I was around 14 in ninth grade, we moved to Florida, and I was like really excited because I was so ready for like another fresh start.
Yeah, and what a great time too, right? You would have been going to a new high school anyway.
Yeah.
So if anything, that was a great time to move because, if it's going to be new, it can be new somewhere else.
Yeah.
So how did that look like when you got to Florida and started school there? Was it different than schools here? Was it the same? Did it just sunnier weather?
That's a big one, yeah. So it was like 3 months into grade 9 already, so like it wasn't the beginning of the year, which was already kind of an issue because, you start off the year and at the beginning of the year, that's when you kind of make friends and meet new people. So like I think it was like October. No, I have no idea. When we moved down, and at first like we were just like living in a hotel because our house wasn't ready, and like we weren't going to school yet because we were just getting registered, but we did go for like an evaluation, and like the school was like 10 times the size as it was in Canada. It was about 3,400 kids.
Oh my
800.
gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like basically like it was like a college campus, so like to get out of your classroom you were outside and you got to like walk over to your next classroom. Like there was, I think, 10 different buildings that you could walk to.
Oh my gosh.
I was lost. Someone was like helping me get around, and then like a week later they're like, all right, you're good on your own. And I was like, I was like, are you sure? Like lunches were impossible because of course like I didn't know anyone. So like my dad did introduce me to these girls and I did have lunch with them. But like they just weren't the same kind of people like that I was used to. It was just all about themselves. Everybody was all about themselves. The friendships were very different. People were very different. Like it was just crowded everywhere you went, and I was just like really uncomfortable. And my older brother, who was in grade 12, he didn't have the same lunches as me most days. So it's not like I got to sit with him either. So it like I never saw him in the day, rather than when I was at my old school, I saw him all the time. Like he was just everywhere I looked. But then here, like if I had a friend in my class, I wouldn't get to see them for like 2 days because the next day was a whole different schedule. So it's like so hard to make friends already because you never see them. And they have bigger bonds with other people that like I'm putting in the effort to be their friend and they already have their group that they don't care as much. So
Right.
like it did take a while for me to actually find some friends, and I didn't in the first 3 months. It actually took till the end of grade 9 to actually find one friend who turned out to be horrible as well.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Wow, that does sound like a university campus,
Yeah, it was
right?
sweet.
Well, you're going to be ready for university
I
and
know.
how that works.
I'm gonna be very ready because
So,
it's just different classes every day. Like it was insane. Like in Canada, you know how it's like the same schedule every day.
yeah.
But there it was like one day was silver day and the other day was burgundy. So you had all 8 classes to deal with for the whole semester, like for the whole year. It's not semestered.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would be difficult to, especially with, I can't believe how many kids were at that school.
And it just keeps getting bigger too. Like it's like 10 times bigger than what it was in ninth grade, I think.
Really? Wow. Okay, so walk us through what happened.
Okay, so it was Valentine's Day, and I remember like going to school and like I just saw like balloons everywhere, teddy bears everywhere. Like they took Valentine's Day so much more seriously than they do in Canada. Like everywhere you looked, there was like roses, bears, like giant bears, like the size of us.
Oh my gosh.
It was insane, like everywhere you look. And like there would be people who like buy like choirs to come to your class and like sing to your girlfriend or boyfriend. Like it was kind of stupid in my opinion, but they took it very seriously. And that day we did have a fire drill in the morning, like just a practice one. So it was about 2:30 and school ends at 2:45, and we had another fire drill that I heard in my classroom. So we just decided that we'd take our backpacks with us and walk down the stairs. And by the end of the day, we would just walk home. Um, I remember walking down the stairs and I looked down, as you know how the hallway goes, and I just
Yeah.
see people just like standing there, just like frozen, not moving, not walking down the stairs. And I was really confused. I didn't have any friends. It was just me. So at first, like they were just standing there in shock, and then all of a sudden I just heard gunshots coming from the second floor below me. So everyone just turned around and started like running back upstairs, and like I was being pushed back and forth, like hitting the walls, like being pushed. My teacher locked his door already, so he had to unlock it for us, and about like 15 of us ran in. And by the time he went to go lock the door, he didn't make it in time and was actually shot in the doorway.
Yeah.
And the door was left open, so it was like full entry for the shooter to just come in and see us. But we we hid in the corner, like we just stayed as quiet as possible, and he passed our classroom and just kept on going. And like I remember like just sitting there, like I was like crouching on my legs, and like my legs were just going numb, and like whenever I moved I hit this like desk that started making noise, and people telling me to like, they were swearing at me, telling me to shut up, that they'd like love me forever if I stopped making noise. And I look over and people are on their phones, like they're like, guys, this is real. Like I was like, what do you mean this is real? Because I, in my point of view, I could see my teacher just lying on the floor dead. So I obviously didn't think he was dead. I just thought he was playing dead because he didn't want to make noise. But like
Yeah.
other people in the corner who couldn't see anything, they're like, guys, this is real. Like look on the news, and they're all texting their parents, and I'm just like frozen. Like I don't know what to do. I saw people texting their parents, and I was like, oh, like we're supposed to do that. So I'm texting my mom. I told her everything was okay because I didn't want to scare her, of course. And then I think we were in there for like 10 minutes, but it felt like 3 hours.
Oh, I'm sure.
And then all of a sudden we just heard like, I heard like the police like banging on people's doors, like kicking them open and like threatening to, if they don't open the door, they're gonna just like open fire. And like, but those were the actual police. And I remember they were about to leave, and then one of the police, I heard him say, what about that door? Like it's open, like go check in there. And someone came in, and there was just like 15 of us, just like half of them were crying, half of them were like literally like frozen there, and then he got us up, moved his body out of the way for us to step over him, and put us in a line telling us not to look right or left, just look down. But of course, me in front of the line, I'm just like, what? I was like, of course I'm gonna look if you don't tell me to. And it was just children everywhere, like just like lying there, like they left them behind, like didn't even check their pulses, like they already knew, and like didn't even try to bring them out to help them. And like I remember like getting out, and then I ran to my mom and I told her exactly what happened. I was like, my teacher got shot, and she was just in disbelief because she didn't think it was that bad. And
Yeah.
then like from there, like it was just, my brother had run to Walmart because he got out. So he had ran, and the shooter actually ran out with us. Like he ran out wearing our school's t-shirt, like because he used to go there, and he got expelled for being like a disciplined kid. And he actually got away and started to like walk over to Publix, like the Metro, and like buy like a burger, and then go to like McDonald's and get a drink. And then like he was found in some sort of neighborhood like the next town over. And I remember just going home that night. I was still hungry. Like I did not eat. We had pizza. Like I ate, but like I just remember my parents turning on the news, and that was just all that was on the news. Like it was
Yeah. Yeah.
covered everywhere. Like you couldn't miss it. You couldn't get away from it. Any news channel, it was just on there.
Yeah.
It was really insane. Like I remember I just went upstairs because my parents were just of course watching. The victims weren't like pronounced yet,
Yeah.
but like I already knew one of them, and I didn't have any friends at that point, so like of course like none of the victims hit close to me as some of the other people were. Like as making friends, like in the next couple of years, I found people who like their best friend passed away and they were just not the same person they were in
Mm-hmm.
9th grade. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Well, I mean, that just that very, like you said, it was 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. A lot happened in that 10 minutes. And
I think it was 6 minutes where he was just having the massacre.
yeah,
In that 6 minutes, he killed 17 people and injured 14
yeah,
with an automatic rifle, semi-automatic rifle.
yeah. And for you to be witness to that, and you know, you think of those 15 people in that room, and you're all in shock, no doubt. And so that, you know, people saying this is real, part of that is probably, I would imagine, them stating it to themselves as well, right?
Yeah, like,
Because you just never imagine yourself ever having to face something like that. And of course, you know, anybody my age, because I'm your parents' age, um, naturally we all remember that day, just like we remember Columbine, we remember Sandy Hooks, we remember, you know, Montreal. Um, and the difference is that, you know, for your parents, they had two kids involved,
yeah,
right? And
which could have easily just been, they could have been gone and they would have just been left with the little one who sings.
yeah. Yes, yes. Um, so in processing all of that, because I'm sure for the time afterwards, there must have been a lot going through your mind and that you went through emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that develop? Like that processing, I guess, is basically what I'm trying to say. How were you able to process all of that?
Um, I think it was just really hard to see my parents devastated, not knowing how to like parent me after this, trying to put me in therapy by like anyone who was like available. And like the first couple of therapists turned out to be like trash. Like they turned out to be horrible, like because they weren't really specified in trauma. They were more grief counselors or just like regular counselors for like mood swings and stuff. So like I remember like my first couple of therapists, when I told them what happened, they were just kind of like in shock more than I was. Like they were just like, oh, like really? Like are you more like they were just kind of not knowing how to handle me at all. And like I just had many nightmares, many daydreams, and just like that was like the only thing that was passing over my head. Like I lost interest in all of the curricular activities that I used to do, cheerleading, painting. I stopped painting. Like my grades started slipping. I couldn't go to school. Like I literally could not get myself to go to school for like for at least 2 months. I tried to do one time. I said, okay, I'm gonna get up, I'll drive there, because my brother was going to school. And one time when we drove there, like we pulled up to the school and I just started bawling. And my mom's like, I'm gonna take you home. Like we can't do this. It took so long to actually get me to want to go to school, to the point where I just kept telling her that I wanted to be homeschooled, or at least put in a place where I go to school every other day, which ended up helping a lot actually, because I'd go to school knowing that the next day I could rest and just be by myself, focus on me, have homeschooling tutors come to me. And it was actually pretty good for a while. Like I did start feeling better. And then all of a sudden one day, like when I started my medication, I just kept feeling like I wasn't hungry anymore. So like I would go from like skipping breakfast to having maybe like a piece of toast for lunch, and then dinner having like a sliver of the portion that they gave us. And then like every day it would just get smaller and smaller and smaller, and my parents were just like, why aren't you hungry? Like are you just not wanting to eat? Are you restricting? And at that point I was just like, I'm just not hungry. Like it wasn't me trying to restrict. It was just my body saying like, you're not hungry. Like if you eat, you're gonna get sick. So
was that a side effect of the medication, or is
I
that
I think we did think it was a side effect of the medication at first, but then we took myself off it, and then I started realizing that it wasn't the medication. It was my brain telling myself that if you can't control everything going around you, the one thing you can control is what you put in your body. So having the control over what I ate made me feel like I was in control of like everything going on around me. So it would go from like eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner to having 2 strawberries for the whole day. And that was like it. And then I started realizing that it was affecting me physically, where I would get really tired walking up the stairs, to the point where I couldn't even get up out of my bed to go to the bathroom without being assisted. So, and then after that, I decided that like this is getting crazy, and I started to eat, but then I realized every time I put something in my body, it just came back up out of me. I was just starting to throw up, not because I was trying to, but because I felt physically sick. And then at some point, I was trying to make myself throw up, trying to make myself feel sick, because I thought to myself that I wanted to be in the hospital, that I deserved to be in the hospital, that like I'll get better treatment if I'm there. And then at some point, my parents tried to put me into like an eating disorder center, like a rehab. And it turns out I didn't end up going, because like they turned out to be not a good place, like not a good place for me at all. Like I would have had to have visiting hours for my parents. I'd have like dress code. I couldn't bring in a hair straightener. I couldn't bring in tweezers. I couldn't bring in a razor, just because they thought those things would make me want to hurt myself. A blow dryer you couldn't have, like anything. So it was pretty much a lot for me, and I was just not ready to be on my own. I just thought I would probably slip and fall, like mentally, if it was just on my own trying to deal with this. So I was almost put into a rehab center twice, 2 different places, and I ended up refusing. Parents thought it was best for me if I didn't go. And then slowly I had slowly it was getting better, but it didn't get better for at least a year. I had a therapist who was an eating disorder specialist because she had gone through something like I had, like an eating disorder version,
Mhm.
and her eating disorder was way worse than mine, like to the point where she was hospitalized. So she would tell me things like how if I don't start eating, that she doesn't want to get the phone call that I dropped dead from my parents or that I'm going to die soon, like telling me physically that I'm not well and not really helping me out in that way. So she caused trauma to me as well. And then I don't remember exactly how I got over it. It still kind of affects me to this day. Like it's not as bad as it used to be, but there is times where I'll go a whole day without thinking that I'm hungry. It'll be like 6 o'clock and I realize that I haven't eaten anything. But
Mhm.
it's not like nothing in me makes me feel physically hungry till I am to this day. Like now I'm actually feeling hunger again. I'm on better medication that works for me. I've had a bunch of test trials with other medication that caused side effects like headaches, dizziness, fatigue. Sleep is a big one for me as well. Like I toss and turn in my sleep. I wake
Mhm.
up about like 4 times a night. I can't get to sleep till about like 3 a.m. unless I take my medication. And
Mhm.
I think like right now, my issue is sleep.
Mhm.
It's
Which
because
is common with
after,
PTSD.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've been an insomniac for 7 years, and it's a constant battle. And it's not that you don't want to sleep; it's that either physically you have a hard time falling asleep,
Actively.
shutting down the brain, and getting to that point. So yeah, I'm up till 3 a.m. a lot of nights as well, and then it's trying to stay asleep,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly.
And it does. It takes a toll on your body, right, physically, because our body needs that sleep. So it's kind of this vicious circle, this vicious cycle of, you need sleep to get better, but you can't sleep because of, and so it's a constant battle.
Mm-hmm.
So now, when you got the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, um, what did that look like for you? Because we've had a discussion before about people not fully understanding what PTSD is, and that most times they think it's just something for that emergency response teams get, or soldiers, veterans, and they don't understand fully that of the spectrum of what PTSD is. And that's something I'll talk more on on this podcast as well, just given my own experience. But what I find is that everybody's PTSD is different. Triggers are different. I mean, the foundation is the same and what we go through is the same. Um, but of course, how it manifests and how we react when we are triggered can be very different. So, explain a little bit about your experience with PTSD and facing that.
Yeah. So PTSD comes in all different forms. Like I've met people who have been like had been like I don't know how to say it, like been held at gunpoint or at knife point to be robbed. People who kind of suffer from like illness, like physical illness in their past and are scared that it'll come back, or even to the point where like you're being sexually assaulted as well. That can cause a huge PTSD. And the triggers are very different, as like mine were very different. They were fire alarms, people screaming, people running in crowds in general, um, hearing people talk about the situation, seeing the victims, seeing the families of the victims. And at one point, I had an actual PTSD therapist who would basically kind of adapt me to like things that I was triggered to. So he would play like the sound of the alarm coming from the speaker in the other room and have me try to focus on myself and try to breathe and listen to music that I like and try to just like not kind of go back into the past of what it was like with the sound. And it took me a while to actually get to the point where hearing that alarm made me feel like I wasn't in danger. One time I was having to re-explain my trauma like over and over again until I felt like it wasn't as scary as it seems in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
That one took a while. That one was really hard at the beginning. Like I had to, at first she just said to briefly describe the day and then get a little bit more detail and a little bit more detailed until I didn't miss out a single part that could still be like inside me. I've had tactics where if I'm thinking about the event to mentally put a shield or a window in between the trauma and me to show that it's not happening anymore, that it's just a memory.
Mm-hmm.
I've been told, like when I'm about to have a panic attack, which I was also diagnosed for, having panic attacks, having depression, anxiety, and PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
The panic attacks were almost daily. I would just full blown shake, cry, scream. I felt like I was back in where I used to be, and like there was nothing you could do to shake me out of this. These lasted about like 2 hours sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Screaming episodes, and I was taught a trick where if you feel like you are getting to that stage of anxiousness, to just stop and think and start to label things in the room. Like, what do I see? Like, I see a painting, I see a light, I see my dog, and just start to think about that and to start taking deep breaths, observe what's around me, and just kind of get myself off the topic of being anxious. And I remember like I would, if I had these episodes, like the whole week next week would just be fine, and every day I would just build up to that anxious point again and then have that breakdown on the weekend. I'd be good for the week, it builds up again, and I have that breakdown. I haven't had a panic attack, I think, since I've been in Canada. I did have a lot of panic attacks. I haven't had one since I've been down here, and it feels really nice to know that I don't need to worry about that. I decided that I wanted to move back to Canada because I just didn't want to go to my school anymore. I didn't want to be in an environment where I didn't feel safe, didn't agree with the people who thought that having a right to bear arms was a good idea and saying that it's just the people. In that case, it's not just the people, it's the fact that the people have the accessibility to just go out and buy a firearm. You don't need to have a firearm to protect yourself if other people don't have access to a firearm.
That's a
Which
great point.
just makes sense. But it is kind of like drugs, how they are illegal, but people still find a way to get them that you just never know. So I decided that I wanted to move home, and at first I just thought if I moved away, all my problems would disappear. And my dad had to explain to me 1,000 times that no matter where you move, your problems come with you. They don't just leave. I thought, you know what, if I move, I go back to my old friends, I go back to my old school, like I'll just think that everything's okay, which turned out to be false. Like I had problems making friends there. I had problems with the school there, even though like it was a totally different place. It just didn't. didn't end, you know. And I met a therapist in Canada who's actually been the best one I've ever met. She has a structure for me, like an actual structure that I'm used to, and like focusing on like the next step to get better. And at some point, I think the whole program takes a year. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I believe that it's really going to work. And I've been feeling a lot better.
That's amazing.
Having like 3 years.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what people don't understand is, when you have these episodes where you're triggered, you have absolutely no control, right? It's your body's response to something that's triggering your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So even though in your brain is saying, no, you're overreacting, you're fine. Your body relives the trauma. So it's almost like a disconnect that
Mm-hmm.
happens. And you can't just shut it off. And I think some people think, just snap out of it. Oh, if only you could,
Yeah,
right?
if I could snap my fingers and just be all better and be what it was like before, I would definitely not be the same person I am today. And I'm really happy of who I am today.
Yay. Oh, that is so amazing to
Uh,
hear,
it
right?
feels really good. It also kind of makes me a little more mature now. Like, I feel like I don't connect with people my age because their priorities are like boys partying, alcohol, like friendships, drama, and my priority is like, what can I do to make this day as good as it was yesterday, or to make myself feel like I have a purpose in living, because I did have a lot of issues with that in the past, like where I just thought like it wouldn't get better and that every day it would just get worse and worse. And I just feel like being here, especially with my family, like I've missed them so much. It was so hard to have to leave them. But I think moving to Canada was a very good idea. And like I'm finally able to go to school every day and just kind of like be a normal teenager again, you know?
Mm-hmm. I'm getting emotional listening to you talk, hearing that you feel like you have a purpose because, me coming out of my journey through PTSD, that's exactly how I feel as well. And, to listen to your story and to hear what you've been through and to hear that message of hope, that's huge. There's so many people out there right now that are suffering in silence and that are finding it hard to cope just getting through the day. And so to hear what you've been through and to hear you say that you like who you are now and that you have this, you feel like you have a purpose. You had to grow up really fast,
Yeah.
right? And I think,
It's a lot easier to become friends with adults because they understand than it is to become friends with people my own age. Because when I tell them what my priorities are, they're like, you don't have to worry about that now. Like all you gotta worry about is drama and friends. And I'm like, it's so much more than that. And like,
you've already been through so much in your very short life, right? Like more than some people have ever had to endure in their
yeah,
entire
I have
lives.
definitely learned more learning school skills than like any adult. Like there's probably adults out there that have not learned any learning skills that I've been taught.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of crazy because there are parents out there that still prioritize like parties and just like boyfriends, girlfriends, you know.
Yep. Social climbing, all
Yeah,
those
social
things.
media. I've tried to stay off social media just
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like it does more harm than it does good. Just
Mm-hmm.
having like if you see other people on social media that look like their life is amazing, it definitely is not like that. I
Mm-hmm.
think that body shaming and all that kind of thing still exist. which
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make it any better. Like my eating disorder was more based on anxiety rather than trying to look like somebody I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
But I know there are people out there that do think that they need to change.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of breaks my heart because you don't need to.
Yes. Yeah. And we learn and hopefully discover that it's really all about love of self and taking care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean, what food you put into your body, although that's helpful. It has so much to do with finding that inner peace and finding that love for yourself and that strength that's going to get you through each day. And I love that you said you wake up thinking, how am I going to make today just as good as yesterday, or better, right? Because then you're waking up with a frame of mind that you're moving forward with a positive heart, and you're moving forward with this desire to do good in the world, right? And that is such a mature thing. It took me 40 some odd years to get to that point. And I think it's interesting to see your perspective and to feel like I feel you already changing the world, right? In having this voice and being able to speak out. And we talked before we started recording about, when there are these incidents that happen in schools, and sadly it's happening far too many times in my lifetime anyway, that I think ever should happen. We focus so much on the incident, and like you said, you bombarding on the news everywhere you turn was all people talking about that incident.
Anniversary comes up, it all just comes flooding back.
Yeah, of course.
The
Of
day
course.
it happened.
Yeah. And so people focused on the incident, people focused on, the victims, and, those who were unfortunately killed, and, those who were injured. And I think what we need to start focusing on, or at least not forget, is those who are left to pick up the pieces afterwards. And I think we lose sight of what that is, and we don't go back to the survivors,
Right.
and we don't offer them help. I think more needs to be in place, in schools and communities, that make sure that there's something in place to help those who are left behind,
Mm-hmm.
because the struggle is real, right? And in my case, it was dealing with my brother's suicide, and that is also very real, that the aftermath of that, the
It's
family's left to pick up the pieces.
um,
Sorry, what was that?
it's a very different kind of trauma.
Right, but
You,
at the same point, again, it's that similar foundation that it creates
mm-hmm.
this thing that's left over, and we often forget about those who survived it.
Yeah.
And so there's, and in my case it was all about the parents, right? And my parents lost a son, and that of course people should be concerned. But one thing that was talked about in a support group I was in, that nobody really thinks about the siblings and how it affects the siblings.
I agree.
And so for me, it was treading that water, that new territory. And so for you, I think we need to, as a society, we need to remember that it's not over when it's over.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
goes on. Those kids who witnessed, and those kids who were in that building, still face that every day thereafter.
Some more than
And
others.
yeah, absolutely, right? Because
Depending on where you were in the building, you had a whole different experience.
mm-hmm,
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm. And so I think we need to start thinking about those who are left behind.
Yeah. And a saying that I think of every day is that even though you had a bad day or a bad week or a bad month, it's not a bad life.
Oh, I love that.
It's not
I
a bad
love that.
day. It's just a bad day. It's not a bad life.
Mm-hmm. Well, being the musical theater geek that I am, you think of the song Tomorrow from Annie, right? The sun will come out tomorrow. And it does. The sun still rises and it's another day to face, but it's how we move forward in facing that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're right that one bad day does not mean, your life is bad. And, looking at the journey you've taken and where you are now, you're proof that horrific things can happen and you come out stronger, and you come out with this knowledge of knowing that it's all a process,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's all about being a work in progress. That's how I describe myself to people. I will forever be a work in progress, as we all should be. We should all be working towards, the betterment of self, the betterment of our communities, the betterment of the world. And you have shown that, just in these few years, to go from the lowest of the low to where you are now, and to hear this hope coming from you, I think is so amazing and so encouraging, especially to be as wise as you are at 16, right? And I am so excited to see what you do in the world.
Yeah, I've finally had my love for art come back. So a
Yes.
lot of things I do as a coping mechanism is hang out with my dogs, take care of them, paint, go outside, ride a skateboard, go on a walk, just like anything that kind of distracts me from having to think by myself. Like
Mm-hmm.
when I was in a very like depressed state, I remember not leaving my room and thinking that the best thing to do was just for me to stay with myself and just have my thoughts with me, which was obviously not good. And
Mm-hmm.
have, like my family to be here to hang out with them, having the tools to help me get out of an anxiety attack, which I could actually share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please
When you're
do.
having an anxiety attack, a good thing to do is you know how you're just like fight or flight mode in that time. You should go on a run up and down the stairs, and then your body usually gets really hot. So I usually take some ice packs and put them under my armpits or put them on my forehead or just like hold them, and it kind of decompresses that like stimulated feeling. And then I also did have like a panic attack pill that I would take, but it actually didn't work as well as the tactics were.
Oh, that's interesting.
It
Okay.
only works when you're kind of on the verge to that panic attack, because once you're out of your window of tolerance, like it's just you gotta wait it out at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like to do yoga. It's helped
Mm.
a lot. Meditating, um, finding a job gives me something to do. Finally being able to go to school and not feeling like I'm in danger. School is actually a really nice thing. I used to be terrified of it.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of love it.
Oh, good.
And I'm just like really excited to just see my career go off into either like painting or working with animals. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Animals are really good. I have a service dog and she is amazing. She's always there for me. She notices when I'm sad. She comes and cuddles with me. She plays with me. Like, she is amazing. I feel like there
Yeah.
should be more funding towards getting service animals for people who have PTSD.
Mm-hmm. I
They
agree.
are expensive and the training is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
If you have some sort of funding, it actually, I know a lot of people who have gotten service dogs because of funding,
Mm-hmm.
like a GoFundMe, and like they just tell me how it's like the most amazing thing that's ever happened to them.
Oh, I've done a lot of research on it too, because I was looking into it for myself. And sadly too, there's a huge waiting list. Like at the time that I called, I think it was a 2 or 3 year waiting list. And at that point, they weren't even adding names to the list just because they were so backed up in being able to provide these service animals. And so I agree. I wish there was something, and maybe something in this discussion will spark that happening,
Mm-hmm.
because I've read a ton of articles about how it has changed the lives of people with PTSD. And I mean, animals on many levels are therapeutic. And I told you about my own animals, and that they gave me a reason to get out of bed every day.
Mm-hmm.
They had to be fed, they had to be taken care of. And
Like
so,
walks.
yeah, and on days when I just didn't want to function, they forced me to at least get up and do that, and that I had to care for them. And then in turn, that unconditional love that you get from them, that saved me. Like that was huge.
Makes me feel like that, like if I wasn't here, that I wouldn't know what they would do with themselves, you know.
Yeah.
Think
Yeah.
to think about when I thought that I was kind of having suicidal thoughts, like one thing that always kept coming into my head was like, what will my dog do? Like she would be devastated, of course with my family as well, but she would just be lost without me,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
because I am the
That's
primary caregiver of her. I'm the one that gets up to feed her. I feed her before I even feed myself,
mm-hmm.
and she's just a huge priority to me.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I have said it multiple times that animals really, like my pets, saved my life, because I would think the same way you did. Well, what's if something happened to me, who's going to take them? Who's going to make sure they're okay? And that was enough to make me not follow through on the suicidal ideation. And I mean, it's a hard topic to talk about too, right? Nobody wants to admit that they were ever in a place where they
Mm-hmm.
were thinking that that was their only option. But this is why I have this podcast. I want us to talk about it, right? Because I think more people experience those feelings than they're willing to admit.
Because I think if I just spent my whole day bottled up, it would just get worse and worse. Like there's times where like I say to myself, like I really just need to text my therapist right now. Like it's not even our session, but like I just need like affirmation, like from her just telling me that like it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How have you seen your relationships change since going through all of this, and your growth? Have the relationships with your family and friends that you've kept through all this time, have you noticed anything change as you developed and changed?
I think I used to fight with my siblings all the time, but now I just think it's not even worth it
Mm,
anymore. Like when I have friends who don't treat me right or don't think important, I just tell them that like I'm a very big introvert, but so like if I had a toxic friend, I probably wouldn't say anything. But like now I have the courage to actually tell them that I have feelings too, and this is what I'm feeling, and this is what we should make different. This is what we should change. When I'm having an argument with my brother, like I always make sure to say sorry before I go to bed, or make it up to them. Instead of just feeding myself, I'll ask my brothers if they're hungry. I feed them as well, you know. I
mm-hmm,
take care of my brother's dog.
mm-hmm.
I always just try to make their lives easier as well as they do for me.
I think that stems from, when you go through your own battle, you develop almost this heightened sense of empathy,
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to be there for somebody else and to
Yeah.
help somebody else. And
And I always
so,
think of the worst when I look at them, you know. Like at
yeah.
one point, I got really upset thinking about how my parents are just going to get old and pass away. You know, that
Mm-hmm.
really got to me one day. And like, you know, it's just kind of sad, but they're here now, and I'm really thankful, you know. They're taking care of me.
Hmm.
They love me. I love them.
That's amazing, right? It's amazing to see your transition and all that you've been through. Now, what would you say to somebody, let's say, another teenager, somebody, a child, what would you say to them if they're feeling any of these things that you have expressed? What would your advice be to them?
Don't keep it inside. Like, if you don't trust your parents, find somebody who you would trust and
Hmm.
just be as honest as you can. If you think the person, like, if you think that person would maybe, if you said that you were suicidal and you told them to keep it a secret, just know if they don't, that it's in their best interest. Like, they're
Hmm.
looking out for you, and that you shouldn't be ashamed of going through something. Like, sometimes I feel like it just makes me a better person at the end of the day. And I'm really glad that I'm so much more mature, and it kind of just gives me a story, you know, instead of just having lived my life being a normal teenager. I would definitely, my priorities would definitely be somebody I wouldn't want to be. Like, many people in my school are people who I would have turned out to be, but I'm glad I didn't because of
Hmm.
what I've been through. And that it gets better. Even if it takes like 10 years, even if you think in 3 years, I'm okay now, like, I might not be okay next year, but I know that it's okay because
Hmm.
I've already gone through such a big, like, bump in my life that I know if I can get through that, if something else throws something at me, then I have the tools that I have to actually overcome it, than to having lived my life being all butterflies and rainbows and then have some sort of bump and then not being able to handle it, you know?
That's amazing to look at it that way too, right? That no matter what happens, you have the tools and the skill
Yeah.
to face it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to be smart enough to know that life is going to throw you curveballs.
All the
It's what you do with it.
not gonna end. Like,
Hmm.
I think one thing happens to you, something else will throw itself at you. And I think even if you haven't been through trauma, it's so good to just have like the tools to help you just like get through little things. No,
Hmm. Oh, is that a dog?
she keeps pushing my computer.
Well, it has been so wonderful having you and hearing your story and seeing this journey that you've been on. Like, what an inspiration that you will be to so many people, no matter what the age, right? You've been through things that we could never ever comprehend. And I'm so in awe of your strength and your courage and how brave you are at how you face each day, and the changes and transformations that you've made in your own healing. And for you to be that connected with it at your age is so huge, so amazing, that I hope you keep talking and you keep raising your voice and being a voice for people your age who might not have that courage yet to step into that, because I think you have a lot to offer and a lot to share with the world. So thank you so much for everything.
I'm so
And
glad I did this because at first I was a little nervous thinking that like I would break down or something. But like it always feels good to talk about it and just know that someone's listening, you know?
yeah, absolutely, it's about taking back our power,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's feeling that empowerment and saying, no, this isn't going to get me,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm
Like,
taking charge and telling my story.
crying anymore.
Hmm.
I did have a point where I used to just block out the memories and just pretend it didn't happen. but that makes it even worse.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
You got to admit it, and you got to
Yeah.
be proud of it, you know.
When we avoid it, it inevitably will always come back and bite you in the ass at some point.
Yep.
So you either face it now or you face it later. Either way, you're going to be facing it.
Now you're gonna have to face it if you know.
Yeah. Yep. And just for people to know that whenever that time is, whatever that situation is that they have to face, nobody is ever alone. And when we talk about it, we find out that, there's so many people out there who've experienced similar or have been through similar. And, you meet these incredible people who've, had these incredible stories and these incredible things happen to them. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, it's not just me, right? There's a whole world of people who are feeling these feelings and going through this journey, and we're all in it together, right? We're all on this journey in life together. Yeah. So I'm so proud of you, Alex. I can't tell you how proud I am of you.
Thank you.
Right. And just to see, the Alex that I knew before you moved down to Florida to the Alex that you are now, right? To see the maturity and just to see this beautiful woman who's flourishing and, exploring this world in a totally different way. You're a ray of sunshine.
Thank you. And thank you so much for doing this podcast. I think it's a really good idea because I haven't met anybody who's had this idea, and I think you're very smart. I think
thank you.
know what you're doing. I think you're going to help many people.
Well, that's the goal.
Yeah.
Right? That's the goal. And like I said, even if it's just one person, that's
okay.
That's okay. We set out with the intention to help, and we hope that the message is received, and we keep journeying on our own path and in hopes that, at some point we're helping somebody else on theirs. Well, I should check back with you, down the road and see where you're at and do a catch up at some point too.
That'd be awesome.
Wonderful.